Sanford and Son was the story of a stubborn junk dealer and his long-suffering son, turning everyday chaos into unforgettable comedy. But behind those familiar faces were real names, real ages, and lives far more complicated than the sitcom ever showed. Time changed them in ways most fans never noticed, and some of their stories ended very differently than anyone expected. Red Foxx as Fred G. Sanford. Red Foxx was born on December 9, 1922, in St. Louis, Missouri. At 50 years old, he played Fred G. Sanford, the loud, manipulative, yet painfully human junk dealer in Sanford and Son, 1972 to 1977. His performance didn't merely entertain audiences. It shaped the rhythm of the show itself, turning abrasive humor into a defining voice of black television comedy. That commanding screen presence, however, masked a personal life that was steadily unraveling. Foxx was married 4 times, including long and turbulent marriages to Betty Jean Harris and later Joy Yun Chi Chung, each marked by infidelity, resentment, and escalating financial disputes. As divorces piled up, legal obligations and emotional exhaustion followed him from one relationship to the next, quietly draining stability from his private world. As those pressures mounted, his body began to reflect the strain. Foxx battled chronic hypertension and heart disease, conditions worsened by years of alcohol and cocaine use that he never fully escaped. The cruel contradiction lingered, even as he pushed himself to keep working and remain relevant. Red Foxx died at 68 years old on October 11, 1991, after suffering a fatal heart attack during rehearsals for the royal family. He was pronounced dead several hours later at Queen of Angels Hospital. Though he once earned millions annually, his net worth at death was consumed by tax debt, and he was buried at Palm Memorial Park in Las Vegas, with longtime admirer Eddie Murphy covering his funeral costs. A quiet ending to a life spent commanding laughter. Demond Wilson as Lamont Sanford. Demond Wilson was born on October 13, 1946, in Valdosta, Georgia. At 26 years old, he played Lamont Sanford, the restrained, emotionally grounded son in Sanford and Son, 1972 to 1977. His performance gave the series balance, grounding its chaos in quiet endurance and making the father-son conflict feel real rather than exaggerated. That sense of responsibility extended beyond the screen and into his marriage. Wilson wed Cicely Johnston in 1974, and while their union endured, it was tested by fame, pressure, and the weight of unresolved inner struggles. Behind the scenes, substance abuse in the 1970s created tension within the household, forcing the family to weather periods of instability while his career continued forward. Those struggles were rooted deeper than celebrity stress alone. A serious injury during his military service in Vietnam left lasting physical and psychological scars, which later fed into cocaine addiction. Recovery did not come easily, but a turn toward faith reshaped his life, leading him away from Hollywood excess and toward ministry, writing, and spiritual work. In 2026, Demond Wilson is 80 years old and still alive. He lives quietly, focusing on religious outreach, authorship, and selective public appearances tied to faith-based projects. With an estimated net worth of around $5 million, built through acting, books, and speaking engagements, his story closes not in spectacle, but in survival, measured by peace rather than applause. LaWanda Page as Aunt Esther Anderson. LaWanda Page was born on October 19, 1920, in Cleveland, Ohio. At 52 years old, she played Aunt Esther Anderson, the Bible-wielding, razor-tongued sister-in-law in Sanford and Son, 1972 to 1977. Her presence sharpened the show's conflict, turning every verbal clash into a moral battlefield that made the comedy louder, harsher, and unforgettable. That fierce on-screen authority contrasted with a personal life shaped by repeated loss. Page was married 3 times, and each marriage ended either in early death or separation, leaving her to raise her children largely on her own. The emotional strain of widowhood and single parenthood followed her quietly through her career, even as she remained outwardly fearless and financially self-reliant. As the years passed, her health began to deteriorate steadily. Paige was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in the 1980s, a condition that led to serious complications including cardiovascular problems and kidney failure. Mobility became increasingly difficult, and she spent her final years reliant on a wheelchair, her body weakening long before her voice ever did. LaWanda Page died at 81 years old on September 14, 2002, after suffering a heart attack caused by diabetic complications. At the time of her death, her estimated net worth was around $1.5 million, earned through decades of comedy, television, and recording work. She was laid to rest in an outdoor crypt at Inglewood Park Cemetery in California, closing the life of a woman who turned pain into power and defiance into legacy. Wittman Mayo as Grady Wilson. Wittman Mayo was born on November 15, 1930, in New York City. At 42 years old, he played Grady Wilson, the slow-talking, good-natured uncle whose catchphrase became part of television history in Sanford and Son, 1972 to 1977. His character brought warmth and absurdity to the series, briefly stepping into the spotlight when the show itself was facing internal turbulence. That gentle screen persona emerged from a life marked by pressure rather than ease. Mayo married 3 times, and while his final marriage to Gail Mayo provided stability, earlier relationships fractured under the strain of inconsistent work and long separations. Balancing family responsibility with an unpredictable acting career became a persistent source of tension rather than fulfillment. Health challenges compounded those struggles over time. Mayo suffered from cardiovascular disease, survived serious medical procedures, and endured complications from hernia surgery that left his body increasingly vulnerable. Recurrent heart issues weakened him gradually, limiting his ability to work and forcing him into a quieter, more restrained final chapter. Wittman Mayo died at 70 years old on May 22, 2001, after a fatal heart attack at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta. His estimated net worth was approximately $2 million, built from acting, teaching drama, and later professional ventures outside Hollywood. He was remembered not with spectacle, but with affection, as a familiar face whose calm presence lingered long after the laughter faded. Don Bexley as Bubba Bexley. Don Bexley was born on March 10, 1910, in Jamestown, Virginia. At 62 years old, he played Bubba Bexley, the gentle, wide-eyed man drifting quietly through Sanford and Son, 1972 to 1977. His understated presence softened the show's harsh humor, offering moments of innocence amid constant conflict. That softness, however, did not translate easily into his private life. Bexley was married 3 times, first to Ruth, then to Jillian, and later to Patricia Bergeron, and each marriage ended in divorce as long tours and unstable income strained intimacy. Even while gaining recognition through roles in Cotton, Comes to Harlem, and later appearing alongside Red Foxx again in The Royal Family, domestic stability remained elusive. As professional opportunities slowed, health problems began to dominate his final decade. Bexley suffered from progressive heart disease and chronic kidney failure throughout the 1990s, conditions worsened by a serious hip injury in 1995 that limited his mobility. His declining health gradually pulled him away from acting, despite continued affection from fans who remembered his quiet charm. Don Bexley died at 87 years old on April 15, 1997, from heart and kidney failure in Hampton, Virginia. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was around $1 million, accumulated through decades of acting, touring, and modest later-life ventures. He was survived by his daughter and remembered as a man whose kindness outlived his screen time. Nathaniel Taylor as Rollo Larson. Nathaniel Taylor was born on March 31, 1938, in St. Louis, Missouri. At 34 years old, he played Rollo Larson, the volatile, unpredictable neighbor in Sanford and Son, 1972 to 1977. His explosive energy brought danger and unease into the series, making even brief appearances feel tense and unforgettable. Behind the scenes, Taylor's life was anchored by family rather than fame. He married Loretta Taylor, and together they raised 7 children, a responsibility that increasingly conflicted with the instability of show business. While he continued working in films such as Willie Dynamite and appeared on television projects like What's Happening, he gradually stepped back from constant acting to preserve family unity. Health concerns later compounded those choices. During the 2000s and 10s, Taylor developed serious cardiovascular disease, requiring repeated medical intervention and limiting his physical endurance. Even as he remained respected for earlier work and community involvement, including mentoring young performers, his heart condition steadily worsened. Nathaniel Taylor died at 80 years old on February 27, 2019, after fatal complications from a heart attack in Los Angeles. His estimated net worth at the time of death was approximately $800,000, earned primarily through acting and later educational work in the performing arts. He left behind a large family and a legacy defined less by longevity in Hollywood and more by intensity, loyalty, and restraint. Lynn Hamilton as Donna Harris. Lynn Hamilton was born on April 25, 1930, in Yazoo City, Mississippi. At 42 years old, she played Donna Harris, the warm yet firm nurse who became Fred Sanford's girlfriend and later fiancée in Sanford and Son, 1972 to 1977. Her role softened Fred's abrasive world, introducing emotional stakes and stability into a show otherwise driven by constant confrontation. That on-screen steadiness mirrored a deeply committed personal life. Hamilton was married to poet and playwright Frank Jenkins from 1964 until his death in 2014. While balancing marriage and work, she continued to build a respected career through roles in Roots, The Next Generations, and her long-running presence on The Waltons, often portraying women defined by quiet strength. As the years advanced, Hamilton's health gradually declined. Though she remained mentally sharp and socially engaged, age-related complications increasingly limited her physical endurance. Even so, she continued to be honored for her legacy, including later appearances connected to television dramas such as The Practice. Lynn Hamilton died at 95 years old on June 19, 2025, at her home in Chicago. While the exact medical cause was not publicly detailed, her passing was described as peaceful. At the time of her death, her estimated net worth was around $2.5 million, accumulated through decades of steady television, stage, and film work. Hal Williams as Officer Smitty. Hal Williams was born on December 14, 1938, in Columbus, Ohio. At 34 years old, he played Officer Smitty Smith, the weary, streetwise police officer constantly circling the chaos of Sanford and Son, 1972 to 1977. His character grounded the show in everyday authority, offering a dry, realistic counterpoint to Fred Sanford's theatrical defiance. That balance between discipline and humor followed him into adult life. Williams was married twice, first to Gay Anderson, and later to Dr. Renee Himes, with both marriages ending in divorce. The emotional residue of those separations coincided with the most demanding years of his career, even as he expanded his reputation through major roles in Private Benjamin and later as the family patriarch on 227. Over time, physical strain replaced marital tension as his primary challenge. Years of relentless work took a toll, though no major public illness defined his later life. Instead, Williams adapted by choosing roles selectively, continuing to appear in film and television projects well into his 80s. In 2026, Hal Williams is 88 years old. He remains respected as a veteran character actor, living quietly while occasionally returning for special television roles. With an estimated net worth of around $3 million earned through decades of consistent work, his career stands as a testament to endurance, less about stardom and more about lasting presence. Howard Platt as officer, Hoppy. Howard Platt was born on June 5, 1938, in Chicago, Illinois. At 34 years old, he played Officer Hoppy, the well-meaning but often overlooked police officer circling the chaos of Sanford and Son, 1972 to 1977. His character added texture to the show's world, reinforcing its sense of everyday authority without ever overpowering the central conflict. That quiet reliability carried into his private life. Platt was first married to Alice Marug, a relationship that ended in divorce in 1978, before later finding long-term stability with Gloria Parker, whom he married in 1998. While maintaining a steady marriage, he continued working consistently, balancing television roles such as The Bob Newhart Show with later ensemble work on Evening Shade. As the years progressed, professional longevity replaced personal turmoil as his defining challenge. Decades of physically demanding work gradually slowed his pace. Still, he remained active enough to appear in films and television well into maturity, choosing projects carefully rather than chasing visibility. In 2026, Howard Platt is 88 years old. He lives a largely private life, occasionally engaging with the industry while enjoying the stability he built outside the spotlight. With an estimated net worth of around $1.8 million earned through acting and producing, his legacy rests on consistency rather than spectacle. Gregory Sierra as Julio Fuentes. Gregory Sierra was born on January 25, 1937, in New York City. At 35 years old, he played Julio Fuentes, the sharp, frequently targeted Puerto Rican neighbor in Sanford and Son, 1972 to 1975. His role injected the series with social tension, transforming casual prejudice into a recurring, uncomfortable source of humor and commentary. That intensity followed him beyond the show. Sierra was married 3 times, including a long marriage to Helene Tabor, who remained with him until his death, after earlier unions with Eileen DeFelita and Susan Pollock. While sustaining family life, he expanded his career through acclaimed performances on Barney Miller and the controversial hit Soap, navigating between comedy and drama with rare versatility. As his career matured, health struggles quietly took center stage. During the 2000s and 10s, Sierra was diagnosed with stomach and liver cancer, illnesses that required prolonged treatment and steadily weakened him. Even as his body failed, he remained remembered for the range of characters he embodied across decades of television and film. Gregory Sierra died at 83 years old on January 4, 2021, in Laguna Woods, California, from complications of stomach and liver cancer. His body was cremated, and his ashes were returned to his wife. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was around $2 million, reflecting a long, resilient career shaped by endurance, identity, and quiet defiance. Pat Morita as Ah Chu. Pat Morita was born on June 28, 1932, in Ileton, California. At 40 years old, he played Ah Chu, Lamont Sanford's gentle, soft-spoken friend in Sanford and Son, 1974 to 1976. Though a supporting role, Ah Chu subtly expanded the show's cultural landscape, introducing warmth and quiet dignity into a world built on sharp insults. Behind the scenes, Morita's personal life was far more turbulent. He was married 3 times, to Kathleen Yamachi, Yukie Kitahara, and later Evelyn Guerrero, with each marriage strained by fame, financial pressure, and his long-documented struggle with alcohol. Even as his career soared through happy days and reached iconic status with The Karate Kid, success often magnified the instability at home rather than easing it. As the years passed, physical illness compounded emotional exhaustion. Morita suffered from chronic kidney disease, worsened by recurring infections and years of alcohol abuse, leaving him increasingly frail despite continued work, including voice roles like Mulan and later television appearances. His body slowed long before his public image did. Pat Morita died at 73 years old on November 24, 2005, in Las Vegas, Nevada, from kidney failure following infection complications. He was cremated, with services held privately. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was around $5 million, earned through decades of film, television, and one of the most enduring mentor figures in cinema history. Noam Pitlick as Officer Swanhauser. Noam Pitlick was born on November 4, 1932, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. At 40 years old, he played Officer Swanhauser, one of the recurring authority figures orbiting the chaos of Sanford and Son, 1972 to 1975. His role was small but steady, reinforcing the show's sense of civic structure amid constant disorder. Away from the camera, Pitlick's life unfolded in cycles of rebuilding. He married 3 times, first to Jessie Blostein, then Linda Hirsch, and finally Susan Whitaker, who remained with him until his death. As his acting career slowed, he redirected his energy behind the lens, becoming a defining creative force on Barney Miller, where his directing shaped the show's grounded, dialogue-driven realism. That professional reinvention came at a personal cost. Years of heavy smoking led to lung cancer, diagnosed after he had already stepped back from acting. Even while ill, his reputation as a director endured, earning him an Emmy Award and long-term respect within the television industry. Noam Pitlick died at 66 years old on February 18, 1999, at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, from lung cancer. He was laid to rest privately following his passing. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was about $1.2 million, reflecting a career that found its greatest impact not in front of the camera, but quietly behind it. Marlene Clark as Janet Lawson. Marlene Clark was born on December 19, 1937, in Harlem, New York City. At 35 years old, she played Janet Lawson, Lamont Sanford's fiancée in Sanford and Son, 1976 to 1977. Her presence softened the series, briefly giving Lamont a vision of stability that always seemed just out of reach. Away from the sitcom's humor, Clark's personal life was marked by emotional strain. She married actor Billy D. Williams in 1968, but the marriage collapsed in 1971 under the weight of 2 rising careers moving in different directions. As her relationship ended, she turned inward, focusing on film roles that carried darker undertones, including Ganja and Hess and the cult fantasy thriller Night of the Cobra Woman. Professionally, Clark stood apart from many of her peers. She transitioned from modeling to acting with striking intensity, leaving a lasting impression in Ganja and Hess, 1973, and appearing in martial arts history with Enter the Dragon the same year. Yet despite her talent, opportunities narrowed over time, and she gradually withdrew from the spotlight. Marlene Clark died at 85 years old on May 18, 2023, in Los Angeles, California, from natural causes. At the time of her death, her estimated net worth was around $1 million, reflecting a career defined not by volume, but by unforgettable, singular performances. Raymond Allen as Uncle Woody Anderson. Raymond Allen was born on March 5, 1929, in Kansas City, Missouri. At 43 years old, he played Uncle Woody Anderson, Aunt Esther's soft-spoken, long-suffering husband in Sanford and Son, 1976 to 1977. His understated delivery became a quiet counterbalance to Esther's thunderous presence. Off-camera, Allen's life was grounded in family and steady work rather than fame. He married Barbara Williams in 1963, and together they raised 3 children, navigating the pressures of television work while maintaining a largely private home life. At the same time, Allen built a parallel legacy as a writer, contributing to socially resonant series like Good Times alongside his acting roles. As the years passed, health slowly reshaped his path. Chronic respiratory problems forced him into early retirement by the mid-1980s, ending his on-screen career after appearances in projects like Starsky and Hutch and Darktown Strutters. Public appearances replaced performances, as illness gradually narrowed his world. Raymond Allen died at 91 years old on August 10, 2020, in California, from respiratory failure not related to COVID-19. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was about $700,000, earned through decades of television work that quietly shaped an era. So now that you've seen where the cast of Sanford and Son ended up, through fame, heartbreak, illness, and quiet disappearances, which story moved you the most? Was it the ones who vanished too soon, or the ones who carried on long after the laughter faded? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoy uncovering the real lives behind classic TV legends, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories like this.